Hello, hello, everyone. It is 11 o'clock right now, today, Wednesday, May 28th, and we're just getting started, so I'll vamp here for about a minute in case we have some people joining us since it's just the top of the hour. But thank you for joining me today. As you may know, my name is Laura Goldman. I am a registered dietitian, and our topic for this week is lactose-free fuel, protein, and nutrition for effective weight loss. As being lactose-free and trying to get in the right type of nutrition can sometimes present a challenge. So we'll go over this, and then at the end of the talk. If you do have any specific questions, feel free to hit the bottom left hand of your screen for Q&A. You can type in the question. You can choose to do so anonymously, or if you don't do so anonymously, I will likely say your name aloud so you know I'm addressing that question. Without further ado, though, let's get started. So an adage that I use almost every week is to remind myself and everyone else that the quality of your calories matters. So when we're doing fewer calories, if we're taking weight loss medications or our appetite isn't as large, we really want to maximize the quality. And I think that can be a challenge also if we're trying to choose lactose-free options or trying to navigate that through the grocery store. So what we're going to cover today, of course, is a quick definition of lactose intolerance to explain what it is, go over lactose content of foods to some degree, as well as talk about some hidden lactose in ingredients so you can know what to look for. And also, I will give some help in identifying some lactose-free protein options, and I did include some brand names even this time around. As always, I do leave time at the end for your questions, and if you do have questions that you want to ask offline or think of later, that's also fine. You can reach out to the Premier Weight Loss staff and they will get in touch with me. So first of all, what is lactose intolerance? You may already be aware, but just to broadly define for everyone listening, lactose intolerance is defined as a condition in which you have digestive symptoms such as bloating, diarrhea, and gas, maybe abdominal pain, after you consume foods or drinks that contain lactose. And to define lactose a bit further, then lactose is a naturally occurring sugar that's found in dairy products in various amounts. So different dairy products have different amounts. It's not one singular dose. Now, the symptoms of lactose intolerance, so the experiencing of that, is due to what's called lactose malabsorption. And so that's when your body isn't making enough of the enzyme called lactase that can help break down the lactose for your body to use. Interestingly enough, there are some people who may not experience symptoms even if they do have lactose malabsorption, but there are certainly quite a few people who do report symptoms. Otherwise, we wouldn't be aware of such of it. And I did give here on this picture, you can see on the screen, you can see the lactose sugar here. And then ideally we have the lactase enzyme that works to break up that sugar into its individual smaller sugar parts of galactose and glucose. But if you're short on this, then it's not all going to get broken down. And that's where the trouble of digestion can play a part. So then there are some multiple factors that can affect people differently, which can make some people lactose intolerant or not. It can be genetics. It can also be due to premature birth. And there are also some people who develop lactose intolerance later on from certain injuries or illnesses that might involve their small intestine. And just to be clear, lactose intolerance is not the same as an allergy. Lactose intolerance is this lack of an enzyme, whereas a food allergy is really an immune system response. And certainly the level of response can be very drastic and send you to the hospital if you're dealing with an allergy. So some of the challenges with lactose intolerance primarily people will comment on getting in enough calcium and vitamin D because, as we all know, especially growing up, if you were in my generation, there was the Got Milk campaign and a lot of push for making sure that people got in enough dairy to get in that calcium, as it is an excellent, well-known source of calcium, as well as vitamin D, because of course we oftentimes will supplement the milks with vitamin D to help get that in. Also, protein intake can be a challenge because many solutions that you'll hear when people say, let's get in extra protein, let's get in, here's your snack, here's this, it tends to be something like cottage cheese, or a very commonly recommended post-workout recovery drink is chocolate milk. Yogurts, as well as, of course, the well-known whey protein or protein shakes. And so when you hear all these things offered up, you think, well, what's left for me, somebody with lactose intolerance? Now, with lactose in foods, this is where we were talking about how it can be found in varying amounts. So it is found in all dairy unless purposefully lactose reduced, where a product might be reduced with the lactase enzyme. So you can think of lactate milk. And some people can tolerate more lactose than others. So you can have two lactose intolerant people in a room and give them the same amount of milk or what have you, and they may have completely different responses with that amount of milk. And so to manage symptoms in general, this does vary from person to person, but reducing your total lactose intake to no more than 24 grams in a day, which not so easy to count up since we don't have lactose listed in grams most places, but usually people who are lactose intolerant can handle a certain amount. And so making sure that whatever foods they're choosing throughout the day will hopefully not go over that amount. Or since we don't know how to count up that amount, or we can't easily count up the grams of lactose that we eat in a day, if you focus on small portions of dairy at a time, because then normally you'll get no more than 10 grams of lactose. Some people also will take an enzyme before they eat dairy products, and other people will just avoid it and choose lactose-free or lactose-reduced options. And I did put this little chart here together. I adapted it from a chart made by the University of Virginia here, but it does go through lactose content of various types of foods. So you can see how things differ depending on what we're choosing. So butter, which may surprise or not surprise you, is actually quite low to some people will even claim non-existent because you get very few grams. Also, the hard cheeses, such as cheddar or Swiss especially, but blue cheese and cream cheese as well, less, getting in an ounce of that, you'll have less than 1 gram. But the grams of lactose can increase depending on what we're choosing. We talked about cottage cheese, which is, again, not more than the 24 grams, but say you're eating different types of foods, then you're going to have it add up slowly. And so certain portions can add up quickly. You also see the milk, so 1 cup of regular milk can get you about halfway there. And sweetened condensed milk or evaporated milk, where we're talking about some more concentrated issues, or non-fat dry milk powder, these are quite a lactose bomb, if you will. So it is important to take that into consideration. I did also want to mention with yogurt, while there is a difference, regular yogurts or the Greek yogurt, there is a difference here. Cultured yogurts tend to be better tolerated, but again, this is all individual. So do what you can tolerate. Also, lactose can be hidden in foods. And I think this is where, even if you're doing small portions of dairy and as a lactose intolerant person thinking, hey, doing pretty well today, haven't had much, but I'm still dealing with symptoms, it is important to check your ingredients because there are milk products that can be added to various foods, especially the prepared foods that you buy ready to eat. So baked goods or breads, sometimes breakfast cereals, you'll see in soups, snack foods, processed meats, et cetera, and protein powders, of course. And while this isn't a comprehensive list of words, you should be able to look for these words: milk, milk solids, curds, whey, lactose, etc., and may contain milk. And so an example here, with this food label, you can see that this is a very dairy heavy type of product here. Contains milk, but also talks about whey protein concentrate, which we'll talk about the whey protein here in a second. Milk, fats, cream, milk. So this could add up very quickly if we're not careful. So be sure to check your ingredients on that. So how do we get in the protein if we're limiting lactose? Well, there are foods and drinks, of course, beyond the naturally lower lactose dairy. So plant-based proteins can be very popular for people. If we're looking at legumes with the tofu, edamame, peanuts, lentils, beans, or nuts and seeds, grains. So think about quinoa, which is a complete protein, seitan, chia, pumpkin seeds. Also, I wanted to list eggs here because we'll often see eggs offered in the dairy section sometimes, but eggs, of course, are not dairy. And one hard-boiled egg is about 7 grams of protein, so that's an easy portable protein right there. And then just to list them out quickly, the lactose-free or lactose-reduced milks, the very common famous one, Lactaid. But Fairlife, their milk products and their protein products are lactose-free. And I think it's very worth mentioning, so that way you know that that is also a safe product. And of course, there are milks that are listed as lactose-free, and you should be able to trust that label. In terms of supplements, there are plant-based protein supplements that you could consider. So pea is a very popular one, as well as soy, hemp, and then there are also mixed sources of plant-based proteins. And I mentioned before, lactase enzymes are often sold as supplements. And so you take that as you begin to eat. And generally, if you take something that has a dose, and they'll list that out with 6,000 to 10,000 ALU, then that should be able to handle whatever a typical amount of lactose in whatever meal you're eating. But as always, with any supplement, you do want to discuss that with your provider, just so they're aware and in case they have any concerns. But what about whey? Because that is popular, it's a very low-cost protein, it's easily absorbable. Is this a reality? Well, you certainly don't have to have whey protein, but if it's something that you prefer the taste or just are curious about whether or not it can work, then the answer is possibly. I would even go so far as to say yes, unless you are very lactose intolerant, because what we can do here is you'll see that whey protein isolates as well as hydrolysates are often lower in lactose than whey protein concentrate. One of my first presentations had to do with protein powders and protein supplements, and I talked about the difference between these. And so protein concentrates are the cheapest, whey protein concentrates are the cheapest among the whey proteins here, but that does tend to contain more lactose. Whereas when you're finally isolating the whey away from the carb portion, then it's going to naturally go lower in lactose. And the hydrolysate is very much the same. You'll also see that there are some whey protein powders that include a lactase enzyme to help achieve this lactose-free option. And I did want to mention, because a lot of times we'll talk about lactose being in the whey products, but just because something might contain casein, which is the other milk protein, casein protein does not mean that it's lactose-free. So it's always important to look. And I did want to give some examples here. This was from consumerlab.com. I used this company. They do third-party testing on many, many different types of supplements. And when they were testing some protein powders, they did also check the protein powders for whey content, they checked the whey protein powders and others for lactose content. And so here you can see the type of whey listed with these brand names here, isolate, hydrolysate. And I wanted to include one that had a concentrate so we can look at some of the differences here. But they also did include a hydrolysate. And so you can see the difference here with this NutriCrossed, their lactose per serving had only 0.3 grams of lactose. And being an isolate, they didn't use lactase enzyme, and it seemed to work out just fine. The GNC, now this one is very important to be careful. There were some other GNC products that didn't necessarily include a lactase enzyme and had different types of whey protein. So be careful. Always make sure you're reading the label. But for them, it was, even with using the lactase, with using these types of protein, it came back as no measurable lactose with their testing, which meant that it was basically less than 0.03 grams per serving. You could pretty much consider that free, if you will. This Isopure zero carb protein. So zero carb already tells me, hey, probably promising, because lactose, since it's a sugar, would be considered a carb. And so I thought this works. It's also an isolate, and yes, very, very low in lactose. And finally, while this is not high in lactose per serving, it does show you that this one is the highest among these, and they included all 3 types of whey protein. And they do include a lactase enzyme, which probably helps bring this down, but it is still higher, and so you can see those differences there. Of note, these were all listed as approved supplements by Consumer Lab, which meant that they contained what it said it contained, didn't have anything dangerous. And so I wanted to mention that too, just in case any of these products were something that you were looking into. So putting it together, lactose intolerance, it can definitely present a unique set of challenges that maybe those of us who don't have to worry about it cannot fully understand until we see it in action. And so that can definitely be challenging. And also remember, tolerance levels can vary between people. So just because one lactose intolerant person might not feel as though this is a difficult thing to overcome, there may be another person who feels that almost anything that contains even a drop of dairy is a difficult to digest product for them. So helping to overcome this or deal with that in your day-to-day life, of course, is limiting lactose-containing foods and then taking enzymes if needed. And remember, generally, you still can incorporate some dairy products, but if you don't want to, or if you have not had success in doing so, remember there are still plenty of non-dairy options available. And whey is still on the table, but read the label if you want to think about that as a less than clever little rhyme there. And that will do it for me so far. So of course I will leave this open to you. If you have any questions, now is your time to shine. And so I'll leave this open for a little bit. Feel free to type in your question at the bottom left hand, anonymous or not, and I'll be happy to answer it. Or if you think of a question later, by all means, reach out to the Premier Weight Loss staff and they will get in touch with me if they don't have the answer themselves, and we can address that later, which is not a problem. So I will wait to see if anything comes in the next few minutes. Okay, well, I think that does it for today. Let's see here. First of all, I want to thank everyone for attending on this rather cloudy day. I hope that you found this informative. If you do want any information later, or if there were certain slides that you would like to see later, by all means, again, reach out to the Premier Weight Loss staff. I'd be happy to get any information to you whenever needed. And I hope that you have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks so much. Bye.